Joe Corry, I've watched him. His feed is fantastic at Corry, Corry, Joel, former sports agent, but also very much in tune with the NFL contracts and salary cap and much more. Joel, thank you. How you been?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. I saw your note earlier about having a flight on Southwest. Did you get bumped around? What was the deal?
Oh, that's a year ago from me going to and from the combine that my flight got canceled. And first we had to switch planes. I live in Vegas. Then when we got to the connecting space, I couldn't make my connector. Then I ended up not getting in until 7 hours later. Then on the way back, it was almost as bad.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I went through a stretch where a lot of my flights, unfortunately, have been delayed. It has been more than not. All right. So yesterday the news came in that the salary cap, and this happens on occasion, is jumping a little bit more than most people thought. How much do you think that makes a difference, or is it maybe not as much as we think?
Every little bit helps, particularly for teams which have tight salary cap situations. The range initially was 265 to 275, that million, that is. I was thinking it would be the higher end of that range. So now we have 277.5 to 281.5. What it does do is, because of the way franchise tag and transition tags are calculated, is it increases those numbers.
Joel, I'm curious as to why the Cowboys are so terrified of the salary cap. You've been doing this for a long time. They don't really they push to the deadline all the time with renegotiating, although I think Dak Prescott kind of called them on that and said, all right, if you're going to push, then I'm going to push right back this year. And then they're always kind of scrambling, and then they say they don't have cap room to do things. Why are they so afraid of it when a team like the Rams or the Eagles or those teams are not?
I have no idea why Dallas operates the way they do. The best run teams are proactive in terms of doing deals with your core players. That's something that Howie Roseman learned from Joe Banner, his mentor. And Joe was like the architect of this: sign your best players as soon as possible under the rookie contracts, because you'll get them cheaper, and try to structure the deal in a way where if something goes wrong, there'll be minimal cap pain. Dallas, for some reason, takes the opposite approach. I don't know why, but I'll use Dak as an example last year. There's no way you were getting a deal for under $60 million per year, no matter when you did it. When Jerry said, I need to see more leaves fall. No, you didn't. He had all the leverage because of the way you treated the last contract, where you dragged your feet and had him play under franchise tag. And then he had you over a barrel, got a no trade clause, got a no franchise, no transition tag clause. Then you restructured the contract 3-4 other times. So you've had it set up where you're going to have over $40 million in dead money if he walked away. That's on you. So you could have done the deal last March. It was going to be $60 million. You could have done it when you did it in September. It was going to be $60 million. Trevor Lawrence, Jordan Love, Jared Goff, and anybody else who signed last year was not going to have any bearing on that deal because of all the leverage that Dak Prescott had.
Joe, do you feel like they just love the attention when it lingers? That is the thought, that their name is up on the screen no matter what shows or networks you watch, and they kind of maybe enjoy that attention, even if it's going to come to the conclusion you mentioned?
Yeah, it sure seems that way, and it seems like that's now trickling down into the players, because you have certain players who generate headlines, and one in particular had a Hall of Fame linebacker, the guy who redefined the outside linebacker position, criticized him because of all of his comments that he makes, meaning Micah Parsons.
Joel, you mentioned the Eagles earlier. Are they playing chess right now while everybody else plays checkers because of the way they were able to, like you said, get their core intact, and then they draft just so incredibly well?
Yeah, well, that's the one thing. If you have a bunch of high-priced players, you better hit on the draft, hit in the draft. Dallas actually drafts fairly well. Mm-hmm. That's not the problem. Dallas does not participate, in the first wave of free agency for the most part. I think the last time Dallas made a splash was Brandon Carr in 2012. But the Eagles take things to an extreme. They structure contracts in a way where you have very low cap numbers early on because they do multiple option bonuses in contracts. Jalen Hurts, $51 million per year deal, cap number under $15 million this year. Saquon Barkley signed for basically $13 million per year, $3.8 million cap number. So as long as you can do that with the right guys, if you miss on a guy, then you're going to have a whole lot of cap pain like they did with Carson Wentz, when at the time to get rid of him, they had a record almost $31 million in dead money. But they also did something that some teams don't do. Draft a quarterback when you don't need one. You just paid Carson Wentz, but you drafted Jalen Hurts in the second round.
Joe Corry with us on 365 Sports. Joe, I've said this before, and I've always been kind of like shot down for this, but is there truly a cap, or can there always be a way no matter where you are with it?
No, there's a cap. The Saints are caught between a rock and a hard place this year. That's an aging team. They kick the can down the road more than anybody else in the NFL. So they're probably going to be forced to restructure Derek Carr again and create $31 million in cap space, where if they weren't that aggressive for a team which isn't a playoff team, then they would have more flexibility. They're better off blowing it up, but that's not their MO.
Joe, what teams do you think that, other than the Eagles, what are the ones that you find the most masterful at building their rosters?
I like what the Rams have done because that was a team that was all in on winning a Super Bowl. They shifted gears on the fly. In 2023, after a disappointing 22 season when they were trying to defend their championship, they decided to trade Jalen Ramsey. They mutually agreed to part ways with Bobby Wagner because he didn't sign up for a rebuilding thing. They drafted well, and they got back to the playoffs in 2023. And this year's draft was really good for them. They got 2 stud defensive linemen. Last year, they found a defensive lineman in the 3rd round. They didn't really miss Aaron Donald on the defensive line, believe it or not. And they're going to move on from Cooper Kupp. They make hard decisions when they have to.
How many times when you were an agent for a player and you got what you thought was not only a fair deal but a good deal, but the client didn't want it because, well, they felt like they deserved more? How often do we sometimes blame the franchise, in this case the Cowboys quite a bit, rather than maybe it's not the agent, or it is, but also the player who's just kind of pushing this thing down the road?
To be your best requires commitment, dedication, and intensity. It's what defines elite athletes and inspires Airwave to find new ways to optimize your performance. Introducing Airwave Recovery, a mouthpiece designed to work while you sleep to further unlock your potential. Airwave Recovery features our patented reflex technology, small, integrated bumps uniquely positioned to activate your tongue's natural response. Your tongue will instinctively move forward, opening your airway and improving your quality of sleep. And thanks to our patented fitting material and a purpose-designed support wall, you'll enjoy a secure, comfortable fit all night long. With Airwave Recovery, you sleep better and recharge faster. Airwave Recovery, recharge your potential.
I didn't have too many players that had unrealistic expectations because as an agent, it's your job to manage expectations. So I would create charts with data and we go over what your market should be. I sometimes had the opposite problem where my hardest negotiation was with a player because sometimes his wife or significant other or family or dad had his ear and was like, that's a lot of money. You can't turn that down. And I'm like, that's not what the market is. So I'm like, let me do my job. And as an agent, it's your job to execute the client's wishes. So there are a couple of occasions where, if left to my own devices, I ended up closing a deal which I wouldn't have because that's what the client wanted.
How about hometown discounts? What is that? Is that a 4-letter word to agents?
Yes, it is. We have one situation going on right now where I have no sympathy for a player who took a hometown discount. That's Matthew Stafford. The Rams traded Jared Goff and a bunch of picks to get him in 2021. They win the Super Bowl. He has all the leverage in the world. You might as well have given him a blank contract and had him fill it out. Aaron Rodgers just became the first $50 million per year player. What does he do? He signs for $40 million per year, same as Dak Prescott, and now he's unhappy with his contract. If you make a conscious decision to leave money on the table, I don't really want to hear you come back and ask for more money. What you should have done at that time was get your 51 million per year and then let the Rams worry about having you take a pay cut.
I know it's realistic for Deebo Samuel to get traded. His contract is pretty movable. The 49ers really kind of handle those things kind of well for the most part. Is it reasonable to trade Myles Garrett?
No. One, the Browns don't want to do it. You don't give away elite pass rushers because the second most valuable player in the NFL behind a quarterback is a pass rusher. First guy you pay is the quarterback. The second guy you pay is the guy who chases the quarterback. Traditionally, it's been the third guy you pay is the guy who stops the guy chasing the quarterback, although receiver salaries have exploded. Myles Garrett is a future Hall of Famer. From a cap standpoint, the Browns have restructured his contract, and they've done what the Eagles are doing because Andrew Berry came from the Eagles, their GM. He's done a lot of option bonuses in the contract, picking up voiding dummy years. So his cap hit is like 17.8. But if you trade him and you get 2025 draft capital, you're going to have $41 million in dead money. I'm saying that because there's an option, $5 million option due the third day of the league year, March 14th. They're not going to change their mind, I don't think, and trade him before then. So you really can't afford to have that much of a cap hit increase to go from 17.8, 17.9 to 41 million in dead money. That's not feasible. And then the only way it works is if you do it after June 1, where you can split the cap hit in 2 years, where it'd be 15 and some change in 2025, and the dead money would be 25 million in 2026, but you don't get 2025 draft capital. If I'm the Browns, I do everything in my power to convince them that we have a plan that we're going to be competitive. I was a little surprised by the trade request after what he said on one of those last Hard Knocks shows, that we're closer than you think to playing meaningful football. So I wonder where that went. I think everyone has a price, and there's probably some price that'll be ridiculous that Cleveland could pay him to rescind his trade request.
How much does the value at running back jump after what we saw this year? I know Ashton Genty's coming out, and there's a couple of others, but does it jump? Will it jump more in the draft, or will it jump more with free agency?
It's going to depend on the talent of the running back. If you have a special running back, then he may get pushed up in the draft. If you have a special back who's got a contract up, then he's going to reap the benefit. What we did see in 2023 is the best running back that year was the highest paid running back in Christian McCaffrey. And then this year, Saquon Barkley goes out and signs for basically $13 million per year, has a season for the ages. There are two guys I know who will benefit from this, not this year, but probably next offseason, Jamar Gibbs and Bijan Robinson. Those guys were taken in the top 10 in, what was that, 2022? Yeah, 2022. 2023. They're taking the top in the first round of 2023. Those will be the guys that will benefit from it when they're eligible for an extension in 2026.
Joel, the Deshaun Watson contract was, on the Browns' end, the dumbest in history. I'm sure for the agents and for Deshaun Watson is great news because it doesn't matter what happened to him. What were your thoughts about that when it happened and now seeing where Deshaun Watson is, where he probably never plays in the league again?
I was shocked that it happened because he had 4 years left on his contract extension. So you typically don't rip up a contract in the NFL, and particularly you don't give someone a new deal, let alone a fully guaranteed contract. But if you go back at that time, Cleveland had been eliminated from the trade sweepstakes. It was down to the Saints and the Falcons. So I guess for Cleveland to get back in, I don't know if this happened, but I suspect that David Mulugheta, Watson's agent, asked for something crazy, and the Browns bid on it, and that's how we got to where we are.
When you look at what Washington did with Jaden Daniels, and I'm just curious, when he was coming out, Heisman Trophy winner, obviously there was who was going to go 1 or 2, but it was pretty obvious who was going to go number 1, who was going to number 2. How much did, in your opinion, he affect the team compared to maybe some rookies in the last decade? And they seem to, with the new ownership, the coaching change, they had some dudes that are Grizzly veterans. Obviously, Bobby Wagner, among some others. How much did who they signed as free agents create who they were as much as anything else?
One, from what I understand, Jaden Daniels has a great work ethic. He's one of those first in, last out guys. So you need that, particularly from your quarterback. The Grizzly vets, the Bobby Wagners, the Zach Ertzes, took a liking to him because they saw his work ethic. So that really helped as well. And those two guys in particular helped change the culture. They're now ahead of the curve. They're playing with house money to a degree, kind of like the Texans were, because nobody expected the Texans in 2023 to be a playoff team, let alone win a game. And then they went out and made a push while C.J. Stroud is still cheap by bringing in more talent. That's where the Commanders are. Nobody expected them to be in the playoffs, let alone in the NFC Championship game. So it'll be interesting to see which one of these guys on the one-year deals they bring back. And they have like $85 million in cap space, so they have the ability to go out and take a swing through a trade, maybe try to pry Myles Garrett away or make a splash in free agency for somebody. So I'll be curious to see what they actually do.
Joel, Brock Purdy, is he going to get paid?
Yes. One thing that people lose sight of is that if Brock Purdy didn't exist, John Lynch might be back in the broadcast booth, or he could be the Stanford GM instead of Andrew Luck, and Kyle Shanahan might be an offensive coordinator because that was a big whiff on Trey Lance. So he basically saved them. Anyone who's saying, "Oh, Brock Purdy isn't worth more than $40 million per year," I want some of what you're smoking. Now, they gave Colin Kaepernick a contract over a decade ago, made him the 6th highest paid quarterback in the league, and it was a terrible structure in that contract. Now, what the Niners are going to probably have to reconcile with is they made a guy the highest paid player in the league after 5 good games at one point in time. Brock Purdy's done a whole lot more than 5 good games. Well, you've gotten to a conference championship game, almost won a Super Bowl. So if you can make Jimmy Garoppolo the highest paid player after only playing 5 good games for you, then you should be able to do that with Brock Purdy.
Joel, if in fact Micah Parsons was your client, and you mentioned him earlier, and of course he's going to get a new contract, and he has his podcast, and he was popping this and that, and if you're his agent, Mulugheta, how quickly would that conversation with him be made or be called, or how quickly would you contact him to tell him to shut up about a hometown discount?
Oh, it would be a repetitive conversation. I'd need a large bottle of Advil because of that. The thing is that I don't think you can control what Micah Parsons is going to say, because he even acknowledged in one of the quotes, "I know my agent's going to be mad at me for saying this." Mm-hmm. But if I'm Dallas, I call him on his bluff. I tell him to put his money where his mouth is. I try to get the deal done as soon as possible. Say, "Hey, you said you'd take a hometown discount. There's no difference between 30 and 40 million. we'll treat you like we did DeMarcus Lawrence. We made him the second highest paid edge rusher, and his guarantees were like second and third in the league. And depending upon what metric for edge rushers, we'll do the same for you. We'll house $31 million per year sound. We'll give you $100 million guarantees, 80 fully guaranteed at signing, and call it a day. That's not going to happen because Dallas would have to change how they do business. I think a snowball's got a better chance in hell than that happening, honestly. But I think what really ends up happening is they drag their feet. Parsons gets frustrated because they don't go out and spend in free agency, and that whole hometown discount thing goes out the window when he doesn't have a deal and when training camp's approaching, and he's going to want what he's worth. And then you're going to be talking maybe $40 million per year at that point.
Joel, you mentioned maybe being the GM at Stanford. How do you think that job differs from the NFL GM, if anything, right now, other than the lack of structure in contracts when it comes to college athletics?
It's got to be harder because everyone's a free agent after 1 year. You have free agency every year because of transfer portal. So it's like, how do you do planning? Like you can't do long range planning because you don't know who's going to be there from year to year. So it's a different landscape. But as you're seeing, more and more programs are bringing NFL people to have that GM role. Bill Belichick brought Mike Lombardi, who's been a longtime NFL executive, Browns, Raiders. So that's how it's going. The University of Florida just hired Nick Polk, who was a longtime contract negotiator for the Falcons. He did Michael Vick's deal, also did all of Matt Ryan's deal. So that's a new position for former team executives and maybe some agents who want to switch over to that side.
Has anyone ever contacted you about doing an NIL deal?
A couple of times. I've done a couple of them, but that's not something that I actively seek out.
Well, okay. I was just curious about that because of your knowledge of what all the other stuff. Thank you, man. Appreciate your time. Great to have you on, Joel. It's always a pleasure to get you on when you can.
All right, thanks for having me, guys.
Yep, Joel Corry, CBS Sports, does a great job. We could go an hour or